impacts of rule changes, so it's good to kind of talk about it. So to kind of talk about what the agenda is here. So for a little bit of introduction, so my name is Tom Hanka. I am the head mentor for Team 4488 Chocolate. I've been part of FRC since 2002 when I was in high school. So this is my 19th season in FIRST. So professionally, I'm a R&D engineer at a tech company called Synopsys, and when I'm not doing that, I'm doing robotics. So we also have some panel members here. I think we probably wait until we do the panel section, then you guys can do your introduction. A little bit of disclaimer as we go into this. So we will be discussing rules. We'll be kind of doing some rule highlights here. Please keep in mind we'll be talking highlights. You're still gonna have to go and read the official rules. We're gonna try to represent things as clearly as possible, but at the end of the day, it's still your responsibility to make sure you understand the rules. And as much as we try to represent things as correctly as possible, well, we'll do our best. Okay. So we'll hit some of the rule change highlights to make sure we're on the same page. We are not, as it's everybody here, the assumption is that you are ready to understand previous season's rules. I will not be diving into previous season's rules. I want to talk more about the change in rules and not what it used to be. And then we'll have our panel discussion and then our kind of open Q&A. When we do the panel discussion, it'll be kind of interesting to have you guys also involved. And so if you have some input about how you think your team will be, changing things based on these rules, feel free to raise your hand and we can share that as well with us. Okay. So, kind of jump into some of the rule change highlights. And I warn you, a few of these slides are going to be kind of like walls of text because I'm actually grabbing from the rule book here. But so the first one here is no work on the robot outside the event during an event. So even if we are removing the bag from the equation, that means that you cannot take that robot home at night, work on it, and then come in. You still have very hard rules about leaving a robot at the event, working on it at the event. Okay. And I have a note here to see the rules in terms of the details as when an event is considered officially start or end, because it's a little different depending on whether it's a district or regional, things like that. And if you guys have clarifications or questions, just feel free to raise a hand. We can dive in a little bit more. So this one's another wall of text, right? So the point here is it's your team's robot. So the main point of these rules is that your team needs to be the ones that actually develop your own mechanisms. So this is one of the first years we've done hard rules about collaboration in terms of you showing up with something that your team made. I guess the shorthand of this, I think Bruce put it very eloquently when we were talking earlier about this, is that if you have the design and you have the fabrication, if another team does one for you or the other for you, it's kind of okay. If they do both for you, it's not okay. So if you show up to the competition and they're trying to give you something for you to put on your robot that you didn't actually make, that's no longer legal. But in the cases, they're not trying to prohibit. So if you are resource limited and you're dependent on the team fabrication, that's still available to you. That's still something you can do as long as your team genuinely feels that it is still your mechanism and your robot. Okay. So there's a lot to read here, but that's kind of the highlight there. One really good clarification here, and I will put some. It's very hard to read. These screens are a little smaller than I thought, but one clarification here is from the Q&A, and I highly recommend that you not only check out the actual rule changes, but also the Q&A. I included a link to both at the end of this presentation, so you guys can get that later on. There's some really good stuff in there that were questions. Citrus Circus asked a bunch of questions that kind of forced them to answer and clarify a lot of these questions. So this one was talking about, what percentage of the mechanism does it have to be for it to be mine versus theirs? And this one here is kind of interesting because they're talking about if you bring something that is disassembled for another team to assemble a competition, that's still not really their mechanism, right? So there's some really interesting little gray zones and stuff, but for the most part, I think the sort of rule is they don't want you to be bringing stuff for other teams. You can still give them cost parts, things like that, but like full design mechanisms, they kind of don't want that anymore. So another big one. So with the removal of withholding now. So we have essentially our 150 pounds of what I'm calling active inspected parts. So when you come to the competition now, you essentially do an inspection for 150 pounds worth of robots and fabricated parts. And within those 150 pounds, since you pass inspections on that, you can do whatever you want, as long as it's within, you're not violating the actual robot rules or the rules for the game that year. Okay, so that's what I'm calling the active inspected parts, because you also have essentially unlimited uninspected parts. Without withholding now, you can essentially bring as much as you want that's fabricated, um, as long as you're not doing inspection on it within 150 pounds. So there's a few little clarifications to be done on this. But essentially, one of the things too that's kind of cool is essentially replacement of mechanism with identical mechanism. So if you have your 150 pounds of inspected robot parts, as long as you have something that is outside those 150 pounds, like a spare exact replacement of something, you can swap that in without having to do inspection, and without having to count that within your 150 pounds, right? That also means that in kind of a well, I'll jump to this one. This is, I think, a good way to kind of clarify the game, or the rules around the 150 pounds, which is the don't go through inspection too much. That's really the main thing that they put there, and how it boils down is if you have, and I kind of did a TLDR of this block of text here. So example one here is they're talking about you have mechanism A and B. They both collectively weigh within 150 pounds, and you inspect them both together. Now you can actually swap between those for matches without having to do reinspection, and you're all good. Now, example two is you have a mechanism A, but the problem is that A and B together are over 150 pounds. So you go through inspection, you do a mechanism A. Now you want to swap into mechanism B. Maybe something broke. Maybe you decided to change your mind. Whatever. Now you do inspection with mechanism B, and now essentially you swap A for B. B is now within those 150 inspected 150 pounds, and you can now play, and you're all good to go. The issue becomes where you start doing example two here over and over again, where now between every match, or I don't know, it's up to the LRI to decide what is abusive, but you start doing that swap over and over again and doing that reinspection to change what is defined within your 150 pounds of inspected, active inspected parts. Okay? Is that clear to everyone? Okay. So, part of this too is, only
weird one.
And there was some good stuff on the Q&A where they had to start defining what a robot, so all capital robot, and a robot is. And I'll explain that shortly. But essentially, they only want you to have one robot. I don't know how to do all caps, but one robot entered into competition, and that's always been the same thing. So you have one machine that's entered the competition, but then the question is, what can you bring besides the machine that you've entered the competition, as to be legal and not violate the rules? And this is where they define robot essentially, this robot, as essentially a machine that has a drive base and has the ability to move around the field. So that's where the term started coming up of almost robots. That means that you can technically, in terms of spare parts that do not count towards your 150 pounds, completely legal for you to bring, you could bring a machine that is missing a drivetrain, and that is considered to be okay in your pit as a spare system that's sitting there. But that doesn't mean that the thing you enter into the competition, being the capital robot, needs to have a drivetrain. I know there was years where, Fred built a robot that didn't have a drivetrain, and they were able to climb the curb and stuff like that in 2013. In that case, that would count as a robot, and if they brought another copy of that, That would still also count as technically a legal almost robot because it does most right.
It's weird.
Yeah, that's weird. That's the whole thing.
So, again, this is a weird one. I highly recommend you go to the Q&A, look at the clarification. There's some really good questions, some really good answers there. I think the main thing here, is they've made the rules fairly flexible in terms of being able to bring more stuff to competition. Okay? So, that's kind of the highlights. Before we jump into this, any clarifications desired for the rules?
So in the Q&A, if I'm remembering correctly, basically you clarified that official all caps robot becomes a single cap almost robot when it's missing wheels and gearboxes.
Yeah, it uses drive base. So yes, gearbox, wheels, etc. So essentially, you can have that in your pit, and then if you add a gearbox and stuff, it now becomes a robot, and you have to do the swap. Otherwise, you have two robots in your pit at the same time, and you're technically.
So 150 pounds, did you mention that's kind of like your allowance and your robot, so it's still 120 pound official limit on what
Yes, and they're separate things, right? One is your robot. So your robot weight will be still whatever it is for the season, whether it's 120 or 35 or whatever. But so that will still be your legal robot to compete with. But outside that, you're actually doing inspection for 150 pounds instead of just the 120. Yeah.
So during inspection, are they going to check the possible configurations you have to make sure that you are in the 120-pound boundary or not? It's going to be a honor system that.
I'm trying to recall back from the Q&A if they're going to check both. I think they are. Yeah. I believe that they're actually going to check the different configurations if you're planning on doing swapping.
You're going to weigh your configured robot and then your additional.
Yeah, they weigh everything together, but the thing is that will they weigh your robot in both configurations? And I think that one specifically, no. I don't think they will. Because the rules, the way they said was it's kind of up to you to make sure that you are legal as you're doing the swap.
Oh,
There was even some weird stuff in there that said that if they catch that you're not doing it, then the LRI is going to talk to you and figure out how to resolve the situation.
It's up to you to say
It's up to you to kind of do that. My opinion would be that if you are swapping between mechanisms, it's a great idea to still go and just throw it on the scale and be absolutely sure. The last thing you want is to go into eliminations or you're getting re-inspected for eliminations and they see that you are over 120 pounds because then the questions that come up. When did you do this change? At what point did you become illegal? And things become very, very awkward. So better to be on the safe side of things, in my opinion. Okay.
So just because there's a rule for something doesn't mean they'll actually check it directly. Right? So, I mean, even if you want to be, you definitely want to be legal, even if you don't know the specific enforcement.
Yeah, I think the question is a good one because it also, it does impact how long you think inspection will take now. You need to essentially, we have an offensive and a defensive mechanism. You have to now put in one configuration, do inspection, and then put another configuration, and do another semi-inspection just for that. And I haven't seen anything so far, and maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen anything so far that says that they expect you to do that. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and do our panel. So I've introduced myself, and if you guys could introduce yourselves.
I'm Bruce Whitefield. I'm Team 2471 and heading into 14 years of FIRST robotics. I'd like to remind everybody to use your safety glasses working with sharp moving objects like FIRST rules.
I'm Brian Lee with Nerdhurt out of Yamhill County. I guess I'm a young one around here since I've only been doing this since my 5th season.
So, I have some more questions on my phone, so excuse me if I'm looking down a little bit. So like I said, as we kind of do these discussions, I do have some questions that I kind of want to kind of hear from you guys about your teams. If you guys have input about your teams and kind of what you think you're going to be doing, then feel free to raise your hand and also shout out. And we haven't actually discussed a lot of this stuff together yet. I don't know what their answers are, so if we see that I'm genuinely surprised or interested, that's because I am. But the thing too to mention, I think it'd be interesting to steer this conversation. We want to speculate in some cases, but I think it's important to not always speculate too much to the 1% of teams. I know that some teams, the 254s, are going to take some of these rules to the very limited extreme. I've heard things about, they're going to be building a robot for each event, and I think it's more interesting for us to kind of talk more about our teams and what we kind of expect to see, kind of focus more on the PNW. Right? So, I guess we come straight to the big one, right? So with the removal of the bag, and one of the major selling points being that now we no longer have to build 2 robots unless we have to. Have you guys, historically built 2 robots in the past? Are you still planning on doing the 2 robots? What's your strategy around that?
I can start on that one. Yeah, we've historically built 2 robots, practice robot and a competition robot. One of them is usually better built than the other, but we try to make them as close as possible to each other, primarily to give the programming team some time as a robot. We've had some discussions speculating what we're going to do, and I think that we'd probably change as little as possible in that aspect and still do the same. Because it still gives extra time to the programmers and stuff like that. I think there will be a change in terms of accessibility to the competition robot for drive practice. And drive practice is going to become an even bigger thing with all teams having access to a driving robot right up to the competition.
As a smaller team, we've never had the resources or manpower to build a second robot. And so I see this as a good thing in some ways because it will allow us that extra time to do some programming and drive practice type stuff that we usually are very, very short on by the time we get it into the bag. A little nervous about not having the downtime between the bag and competition because that's, I know a lot of teams, if you're building 2 robots, you don't get that anyway, or you don't have to. But as a smaller team, we're all working full speed all the time, and without that break, a little concerned about that.
Definitely a chance to burn out there.
Yeah.
The other thing too, so you're talking about using the competition robot more. I was curious, are you concerned that there's going to be more wear and tear on the competition robot to the point that now you might be showing to the event or something might break during practice right before?
That's another reason behind going ahead and building the second frame. Plus the 150-pound or the unlimited extra lowercase robot, it became spare parts, right? Where it wasn't available that way before.
Yeah. Take the gearbox off, take it to competition.
Yeah, so lots of reasons for having that extra frame if you've been able to have the resources to do it. But that's what First is doing is opening it up for the teams that don't have those resources to not be restricted from access to a working robot. And that's going to level the playing field, I think, quite a bit.
So, kind of show of hands, do a lot of other teams do practice robots? So raise your hand if you kind of build 2 robots. I just want to make sure also, how relevant some of this stuff is. And the other thing too, regarding practice robots, do you think that overall you think you're going to try to improve the quality of the practice robot? At least on our team, we've tried to get our practice robot more and more accurate throughout the years. Oftentimes it becomes sort of our more prototype robot, or we're throwing things on there and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It allows us to kind of iterate through. There's some years we've been really good about CompBot and practice robot. Last year actually was pretty good about this. Being very, very similar. Other years it was so different that they were almost unusable in some cases for development of software.
Yeah, well, we've had both situations in the past where they're not similar enough, but the effort is to get them to be identical.
Okay.
That's where it's really useful. It was very useful when you didn't have, when you had to have a robot in the bag, because you could actually test a replacement part on your identical robot. Right? So, and I'm looking around in case people have hands, yeah.
Are you sure what you're planning to do as far as?
So our plan right now is very aligned with what Bruce said. So for us, it's kind of it's a bottleneck oftentimes. So oftentimes for us, when we have the practice robot and the comp bot, and the comp bot being in the bag, it means that development of software, development of new systems was all kind of bottleneck to that one practice robot. Having the comp bot out of the bag now means that it's great for driver practice, but it's also great for if we want to do more aggressive software development. We now have 2 channels to do that. Of course, probably some of the less risky stuff not being developed on comp bot or otherwise. So yeah, for us, the way we see it is just additional bandwidth, additional stuff that we can do after the build season is over. So we should be able to get more done and be more ready, I think, for competition. So I don't want to dive into the details of this just because we're trying to focus on the changes. But essentially, you'd have 6 weeks to build your robot, and then you have to put one robot in a bag, like a physical bag, and you can only take it out for competitions or for small windows that you could work on it. It has been limited. Yep. So, Brian, you brought up actually a very interesting thing too, which is schedule, right? You talked about, well, now with no bag, now we kind of have no excuse to not work, right? So, how do you think that this change kind of impacts your schedule? Do you think that you're going to try to spread things out a little bit more, or are you just going to just go for it?
Possible and take the bonus of the extra time, but there's not much extra time if you've got a week one event anyway. So, just a little bit more, an extra week of access. So we'd like to basically feel like we did what we've done in the past, and then, now we have some bonus time, right? Rather than using it up and being in the same place as we always would.
Right. Yeah. I know for us, we're very scared because typically we avoid week 1 events. My team historically has always avoided week 1 events. We like that extra time to prep for week 2 and kind of get to week 2 ready. So this is one of the first times we're doing a week 1 event ever. So our schedule is going to be crunched down a little bit more. We're going to actually try to finish on time. So, let's start. Oh, yeah.
So historically, especially week 1 and week 2 events, it's not uncommon to see a couple of robots that can't move, that don't really have working mechanisms or working drivetrains. What do you guys think about how the competitive level of play is gonna change without Stop Go Day, like both in district competitions and in PNW district championships and even at Houston, like. Is there going to be a higher ceiling, also like a higher floor? What do you guys think?
I'll let you guys take this first and then I'll pitch in. Unless,
I think that there's going to be a higher ceiling because there's more opportunity to learn throughout the season for more teams. Right, the top tier teams of the world, and I know we're not really trying to focus on that, but they're there to look at how they do things and try to reach that level. Mm-hmm. And they utilize that time throughout the season to get better. And now you have more access to be able to get better, plus more weight allotment to bring things in to be better as well. So I think that you'll see that higher ceiling. But I think there's also a trap in there for many, many teams, which is it's opened up the door for a lot to do a lot more, and teams may subscribe to more than they have the resources for. And then, like, for example, with that 150 pounds that is within not being inspected, and the extra weight that's sitting there to even be utilized with an inspection, there's going to be the temptation to maybe build 2 or 3 different mechanisms rather than actually narrow down your decision early, right? That's just going to consume your team resources, and I could see some teams getting stuck in that trap where they don't really make a decision because they didn't have to or didn't think they had to. and then they run out of resources to complete anything. So I think you're still going to see those week one robots that don't run for a different reason though.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think for a lot of teams, it will kind of raise their floor at least as far as like, we'll have more time to do some autonomous points and fine tuning and sensor work that we don't typically get to do. So hopefully our overall level will increase a little bit if we can be careful of that trap of trying to use that time to do too many more major things. I think a lot of the teams that you see at week one not moving or having major problems, or maybe if they kind of stick to that schedule of we still want stuff done by week 0, we can use that to fix things, then they can also come in getting better. But if they think that there's going to be that temptation for a lot of teams to try and get more done and still not have anything done until the night before competition, and then if your schedule slips at all, you're showing up at competition with a non-moving robot.
I definitely agree. This is going to be the year of scheduling mistakes. In hindsight, we do get an extra week of work between, stop build and now our first competition. The way I see it is that there's a bit of a spectrum between low resource teams, high resource teams, where the ideal point is that every team hits that sort of like performance saturation point. And that curve is different depending on your team, right? So some of the elite teams will kind of get really good really fast and kind of saturate earlier in the season, I believe. While some of the lower resource teams that typically struggle, where they were kind of doing little jumps, will now kind of be able to grow a little bit more. So I think week one stuff will be pretty much the same in terms of quality, but I think that Worlds actually will be a little bit better. I think that more of those teams will have more time to kind of work on the robot and get to that point. Mostly because those are the teams that typically don't have practice robots, so they were really only working on the robot at competition. So we should see more people hopefully moving in autonomous and doing basic performance. So I think the schedule will be less dramatic based on who you get paired up with.
Yeah. I think you make a great point about how later on in the competition season you may see greater benefits. I think one of the major reasons you'll see that is that there'll be more teams with robots available between events, which is going to lead to a lot more dog practice happening. And I think that for teams that really want to be competitive at those later season events, it's going to be important to get practice with other robots present. I think that's a lot higher quality practice. My question is, where are you guys planning on doing practice? And do you have plans to get other teams involved?
Sure, I guess we would love to join other teams for practice when we can. Being in Yamhill County, we are a little bit farther away, away from the core Portland area. There's lots of teams. We don't have space for a full-size field ourselves at this point. We can run about a little bit less than a half sized field is what we typically practice on. Last year, I know there was a field in Wilsonville that was available on occasion. We were unable to never make it over there, but with more time, maybe we could. We'd be happy to drive to Salem, Corvallis, Wilsonville if there were fields available and join in on something like that for sure.
Especially having the two robots that, not in your case, right? But like the case where you have like a competition practice robot. For us, historically, we haven't gone to those things because if we are taking the robot there for driver practice, that means that software development has to come to a halt. And I think that this opens up more, like I said, more bandwidth, more doors for us where we can take the drive team, take the robot and go and practice with that robot while we can continue another portion of our team to continue doing their work. So we'll have to kind of make sacrifices, I think, a little bit less this year. So I think we're going to be more interested in going and looking for opportunities like that to practice. Mostly because our setup in our shop for field is quite awful right now. That's a whole other stuff. But essentially, yeah. So for us, going to a field is something we're going to be looking for.
So, I think that drive practice is going to be a really game changer in this new rule system and season. And it's always a real defining item for how well a robot performs. Is really a lot of teams don't really get to do enough of that. So we've managed to score a space that can do a full field, and we're trying to set that up as a regional community resource for teams to come actually do these sorts of practices. So we call that the Stemnasium, and it's available to come and practice. And pig mice have been there a fair amount.
And it made a huge difference.
Yeah, so probably just if you have any doubts about what a difference drive practice can make in your competition performance, just talk to them. And so we want to make that available to more teams because we think that is going to be a much more in-demand item. If people have access to the robot, making the big difference there. And so, as Bryce mentioned. There's also a small caution in there, however, which is I think we're going to see, we certainly see that by the end of a long season, our robot is now going into wear out. And I think that if you, there's a trade-off between practice and breakdown in a sense, right? So building your robot robustly against breakdown is probably going to be even more important because you're going to put more miles on it.
Especially if you design games to be as defensive friendly as
Yeah.
And so Corvallis, where we're at, besides the scrimmage we do for week 0, which is going to occur again this year, and there's a whole big discussion I can go into that, but we'll be the same week 0 as it's always been. So we're still doing it, and that provides a full field for people to practice on when we bring it up to people. But there's also First Force has a half-ish, more like a little bit greater than a half size field in Albany that we open to anybody who wanted to work on it for people who needed to do stuff. So mainly it's just the people around First Force who know about it to go view it. But so there are we have a little bit of resources here and there, and sometimes it's nice to do it with another team just so you can see how things work between the multiple teams together and how things work together.
We can only hope for another game that plays well in a half field because that lets a lot more people have access to that kind of practice area.
It's true. Yeah. And if I can use it as a jumping point into a relatively controversial topic, okay, which is in terms of team collaboration. Team collaboration is fantastic. Scrimmages are fantastic. Like nothing is better, in my opinion, than going to a competition when you've already had time to go to a scrimmage, get practice, figure out your robot, and get a feel for the game before you actually show up to an official event. There is a lot of talk about secrecy this year, right? With the new bag rules in terms of the risk that someone can show up to the next event with a copy of your robot, right? Do you think that this might sort of hurt attendance to scrimmages? Have you guys attended scrimmages in the past and plan to still attend? I know you spoke about this briefly. Is that a concern of yours or not?
I don't think for us it's a concern. We'd rather go and get the good experience and kind of see what other teams are doing. We've always enjoyed that part of it. There might be a chance we would take something away to go incorporate into our robot more now that we have time. But I guess that part of our team rule, at least for this year, is we're not going to try and make major changes after week 0. So we wouldn't be going, let's take off this whole mechanism and put on an elevator instead because we saw Spartan's cool elevator. Let's try and build that in the next 3 weeks. We're not going to do that.
And that's the other part of these scheduling mistakes. It's not just build season, but also between events where people bite off more than you probably.
I think finding good ideas by going out and seeing what other teams have done has been part of First since forever. And it's just maybe might be a few more opportunities that to take advantage of that, that's what we're about, right? So, we don't intend to hide anything, and I think that everybody should just share. I think we will see more incremental improvements coming from the larger body as people have an opportunity to take advantage of some small thing. I don't think you'll see wholesale mechanism changes, but you might see a lot of fine tunings and things like that going on through the season, hence raising that into the season level of play.
For teams with very similar practice spots, is it a huge difference now when, say, I'm sure the level has changed, but if we went back to last year and there was a particular way you were grabbing a hatch, and you went to a scrimmage or saw a release video with a better way to grab that hatch, couldn't you still build that on your practice spot and move it for your open back time or move it in a competition? You know, you had to deal with the holding allowances, and it was a little bit harder, but was it really that drastic of a change for you, do you think?
I mean, one of the limiting factors for us in the past was that withholding allowance, right? You're right, you could still copy designs, adapt designs, iterate on designs, but you were limited to an incremental amount per event. And I think that this is where it kind of opens up to do bigger changes without being worried about that. Like our climber last year, for example, that was a pain because it was so heavy that we couldn't do the change to two systems at the same time. We could only pick which one we were going to be putting those 20 pounds towards. And so, you know, you definitely run the risk of trying to do too many changes at the same time, and now you show up with a robot that doesn't fully function. And I think there's still going to be a limitation in terms of, you know, budget for a lot of teams, even our team. So budget being one, time being the other one. Even if you copy a design that you saw in the video, you still have to write all the code for it, figure out the sensor stuff, like how you're going to integrate this into your machine. You might still have issues in terms of like for example, for Chesney Champs, we completely redesigned our manipulator for 2018 season. And that was huge for us, but at the same time, like we couldn't do that early in the season because we were doing so many other things. And this might open up more opportunity to do more changes. And I think it really depends on the resources for the team.
The open bag time was usually the most restrictive thing. The weight was probably second, but mostly it was time.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that's opened up the most here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Bryce, by the way, I'm the versus team, which wants to know. Yeah, definitely time and weight was a restriction for us, and it's limited what we could do, but we basically redesigned the mechanism on the robots after our first event almost every year. And that'll probably happen again this year. Hopefully not a big thing, because there's pretty much a correlation. The bigger change we make later in the season, the worse we do in the season. Which isn't necessarily because the change was big so much as there were a lot of things we needed to change. So hopefully we can start out with something solid this year. We don't have to make some big changes, but it'll certainly be possible and probably even something.
It definitely always brings up the question of the doing more versus refining.
Yeah, it's a development race, right? So from the start of kickoff to World Championships, whatever your last event is, it's a race to show up with the best robot, the most refined, most effective robot. And if you basically have to change a mechanism, you are taking a step back and refining the game in order to develop something new. So you're always going to be at a disadvantage if you make that change later.
And hence the trap I'm trying to warn people about, which is thinking you've got a lot of extra time and to not narrow your focus. And you still have to narrow your focus.
I think another thing to think about that too is although it's kind of similar that you do have a finalized time, when you run into that bag time and you throw it in the bag, you're like, okay, we screwed up, we didn't get our robot done, it's not actually driving. You now have maybe 2 weeks until your open bag time, and you can think about it, you can ponder it, you can build some things off the side. So you kind of have that recovery buffer where you can do some things to recover if you totally screwed up and you weren't ready when you're in the bag. Now, if you just move that timeline to the night before competition, you're having more buffer. If you don't get it done by then, you don't have that time to think about it and ponder it and try and figure out how you're going to recover.
I like what you had earlier said about the schedule. Keep acting like you have a bag there, bag type sitting out there, and then use the other time you have for driver practice, for software development, for whatever, and then use that time for the other things that you had to always put off and not really get as much as you really wanted to. And I see that, but I think that's the direction we're going to be heading this year. It's just because of that specific little thing that we just never really took the time for software. Now we will have it. We'll use it.
So one thing that kind of came up too is in terms of like the secrecy things is both your teams have done reveal videos in the past. You guys still plan on doing that and kind of announcing your designs to the world? Or?
Yeah, if we get the time. I think we've only done one in the past.
Yeah.
It was mostly just videos from scrimmage put together. A few other pictures, but so if we had the time, I would have no problem with putting it out there. It was fun to make and enjoyed it.
Yeah, our reveal video varies based on student interest to do it, and if we have a student that's really fired up about it, then it gets very fancy, and it gets less fancy at other times. What's going to be nice is actually always having the reveal video be of the competition robot, not the practice robot. Because of access.
Yeah.
That's true. Oh, you need to take from the bag to do it.
Yeah, well, actually, but that's a factor. It's probably a lot more likely that we'll do it this year because we'll have the time to do it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's always been kind of hard to schedule that time to do a reveal video. At least for us, we typically try to do it, but it's always hard to get that time in.
Yeah.
We've had to use unbagged time before to do.
I will say it has led to very creative filming to make it look like it wasn't that robot.
Yeah, I mean there was a year that we had to do very creative filming to make it look like the robot was behaving the way it was supposed to. To kind of jump back over to some of the rules. In terms of the changes with building, so how do you guys feel in terms of like the new rules with the inspected versus the uninspected? Do you think you guys are going to take advantage of that a lot? Is this kind of a relief for you guys or a concern? Or?
For us, it's a relief. But I am concerned about how much weight can actually fit in our trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unlimited with an asterisk.
Need a bigger trailer.
How much fits in your pit, I guess, is really
yeah.
That's true.
I think it's a good thing, and it's kind of an expansion of things you could do before. You could have small components, but only if they were within the total was underneath the 120-pound robot limit, and so that was very, very limiting, and kind of increased that a little bit. Hoping it'll cut down on re-inspections at competitions as well, because we could have multiple configurations already re-inspected. We've talked a lot about having multiple components in a modular system that we could swap out for different things, but haven't really done it before. Last year, our whole hatch manipulator system was replaceable. We had a complete spare. We could swap it out in under 45 seconds, and we had to multiple times. It was a very fragile but easily fixable component. And so that worked out really well for us. I would like to do that next year. I like that I don't have to think about it and worry about, can we fit this within the holding allowance? We can just build it and take it.
Yeah, we've done swerve drives in the last few years, and I'm not sure it's going to be a swerve game next year. I'm kind of suspecting it might not be, but having a module that you can drop in and not having to use your weight allowance to have that is going to be a big door opener.
Yeah,
it's huge. And I think that's an alternate strategy that we may see some teams do. I'm not sure how much will happen this first year, but some teams focus on a subset of the game. Maybe possible to focus on a configuration for that subset, but if later on, after alliance selections, we get a different role, reconfigure for that. It's just one inspection.
if you've planned for it. So,
Yeah.
need to be a fairly high resource team to go build two completely different strategies on the robot. But I think we will see some of that.
That's one thing I'm very curious about that you bring up is, now without cheesecaking, right? So cheesecaking, let me clarify for people what that is essentially, it used to be legal, right, for you to bring a mechanism to competition and put it on another robot. And historically, this was used by a lot of teams where you show up to Worlds with an extra climber, or something that you can bolt on, or can grabbers, or whatever, and you pick a robot based off that compatibility with that system, and you spend time before eliminations putting it on the robot. It was always a very stressful thing. I hated it, so I'm really glad it's gone. But at the same time, now we can't actually cheesecake, but do you think that teams might use some of that extra weight in case they're kind of on borderline, might design a defensive system to put in case they are a second or third pick, and kind of make a configuration for that?
Yeah, I could totally see us doing that, especially with something as simple as defense. Just being able to take off the fragile stuff, add on some weights, something like that. Something that's not a super complex secondary.
I think we go until 12:30.
25.
25? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the things too, I was actually kind of thinking about is in terms of like the mechanism swapping, where you're talking about, thinking about different configurations, things like that. One thing I'm kind of curious to see if it's going to happen with some teams this year is the open door of, now we'll just build multiple configurations, right? And try to, from the beginning, try to figure that out. We had one year where we had a parent actually grab some students and secretly start developing a secondary parallel strategy design. And I kind of wonder if this is the year where debates will, instead of ending in a sort of a agreement, will end up in now let's just do them both, right? You think that might happen?
That's the trap.
It's a trap? Yeah.
I was,
Big resource sink.
yeah, I can definitely see that being a trap. I was just actually thinking about on a very small scale how that could have been good for us last year with our hatch grabbing mechanism. We had a different design in mind than we thought of at one point. We thought, oh, that might be a good way to do it, but we're not really sure, and we have to build it and test it to be able to find out. And so we decided not to even try it. I still think about it every once in a while. And it was a small enough component that we could have just built a second one and taken it to competition and had the two different styles that we could have hot swapped. So I think on a small scale, I think it would be a really good thing to be able to do that. I think on a large scale is where you're running the trap and the team gets divided in time and built two completely separate robots and then other pieces don't mesh.
The one thing I can see increasing is the modularity of all the systems in general. The ability to swap out a exact same component if something breaks, or being able to swap out a different component for a different strategy. Any way you want to look at it, being able to go with that modularity, I think is going to be even more valuable now.
All right. Unfortunately, my laptop off, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so it makes me think we're going to feel more like FLL teams. Switch out of the mechanisms. I wondered if anybody had any thoughts of things outside of the mechanisms, but more of the logistics and things like pit repping and how this is going to have an impact on those kinds of things.
In terms of pit
Reps. Being able to talk about if your robot is changing so much, how are you going to be able to put together things like your flyers about the robot and have your pit team well versed on what they're talking about?
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with like some of the strategy stuff. We have a strategy panel actually later today, and that might be a great thing to bring up because I think that's a great time. Okay. So we're out of time here. I just want to kind of give two reminders. Unfortunately, I borrowed this laptop is locked, but first one is the first force scrimmage, right, which is happening the first weekend after end of the build season. 15th, I think. Yeah, it's February 15th. Again, highly recommend you go to scrimmage, get practice. You have access to your robot now, so it's a good
And
thing.
inspections.
Inspections, yeah. The other thing too is mentors roundtable for you mentors out there. So my team is hosting a mentors roundtable this next Saturday. You know, we can do a lot more speculation there and talk about this stuff. It's a very social thing. You can come and hang out and talk. You know, come and talk to me if you want interested in that. And I did include in the slides, which will be going out, resources to all the information. So thank you guys. Thank you for joining us.